everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
Hey guys.
Kathy, we missed you last week.
I heard. I'm on vacation. I was on vacation last week and this week, so I've missed a few of the calls, but
I
managed to
looked-
get to a bunch of them.
I looked for you. It's like, Kathy's not here.
I guilted her into coming today. Look at her.
You did not. I just have no life, right? So I managed to coordinate my day today such that in between this morning's call with the leadership group and this afternoon's call with you guys, I ran out and got all my errands done.
Nice.
Got dog food, you know, that's important.
That is impressive. I'm still sitting in the exact same chair. Haven't gone anywhere.
That's kind of
These
scary.
meetings. I know, it's very scary.
Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to see you all. I have a camera. I'm really excited to have Gina Knepp here today to talk to us and share some wisdom with all of us and answer our questions. Gina, do you want to take it away? I mean, do you want to just sort of talk about the things that you're working on and what you're also, I know you have some questions too about like what people are doing for Lost and Found. So for those of you that don't know Gina, she's on our executive committee for the Haas Project and is with Michelson Found Animals Foundation and is a wealth of knowledge, all things return to owner. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. And I'm also super excited that we have Jen Crosco on the call. Hi, Jen. I haven't seen you in so long.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. Excited to be here.
Sure. So in case you don't know who I am Gina Knepp, the one and only. I'm with the Michelson Found Animals Foundation, and they gave me the lovely title of National Shelter Engagement Director, which is really a mouthful. But I've been working for them for almost a year. I retired from the Front Street Animal Shelter after a sweet 9-year run of managing an open municipal shelter and decided I was old and tired, and then I got another job. But I only work part-time, and my sole focus is increasing the return to owner rate in the United States and really focusing and shedding some light on that topic. And I think the pandemic was probably one of the best things that ever happened to RTO because, rewind to a year and a half ago when I started doing some teaching for Michelson before leaving Front Street, nobody was really talking about it. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't sexy. It was all over the charts, and it's still kind of all over the charts. But suddenly there's a bright light on this topic, and I think we're all realizing that it's a component of what we do that can I think exponentially move the needle in life-saving. I've morphed a lot in my thinking over this last year. And just recently, Bobby and I were talking about it. I decided that there's 3 cycles to RTO. There's a before, a during, and an after. And I don't know how that epiphany came to me at 3 o'clock in the morning, but how much time are we spending on the before? And it's like, what does that mean? Are our websites clear, concise, actionable? When we tell people to take an animal in to get it scanned for a microchip, an animal they may have found, we don't tell them what to do, right? Just go scan it. Well, in California, if you take a stray dog or a lost dog to a vet, they'll scan it, but that veterinarian is not going to research that chip for you. They may give you the number, but the average person doesn't know about the AHA tool, right? They don't know what to do next when they have a chip. So rewinding, going back to our websites, how actionable are they? So when we tell people, go here, scan for chip, we need to insert, here's the microchip lookup tool. How does that, put the number here? And I know that seems so rudimentary to us, but the average person, they don't know. We're the experts, right? We tell them to make lost pet signs, right? Well, how many of us have a link to an actual, YouTube tutorial that shows them what the sign should look like, where it should be posted, what it should contain? So it's really drilling down into the information that we're giving people. Most of our shelters, at least I'm presuming it's true for, you know, private shelters as well, but county and city shelters, they're the most hit websites for any government entity. So people are on there all the time looking for information. And we know that people are finding animals and not including us in their search for the owners all the time, right? Because we really only touch a fraction of the animals in our communities. I know it feels like more than that, but it is a fraction. I mean, what is the before is what's the culture in your organization relative to RTO? Does everybody speak RTO? Do your volunteers know? Do your staff know? Do your field officers, most importantly, can they speak RTO? Do they know what information to share with people in advance of someone losing a pet, right? How much are you charging for microchips? Are you making it affordable? Are you registering those chips on behalf of pet owners before those animals ever get lost? I mean, the research that we've done shows that the shelters that are registering on behalf of the pet owner have the highest RTO rates in the country. It's all those before things. I mean, how often are we doing marketing and community outreach on the topic of pet identification? Usually we do it twice a year, right? 4th of July, New Year's Eve, make sure your chips are updated. We don't talk about it all the time. And what you measure gets done, what you talk about all the time, what you put at the top of your agenda and discuss regularly with your staff become those items of priority. So those are some of the before things. Like, when was the last time you looked at your internal practices and how harmful they are to people who are trying to RTO a pet? Because we have them, those unwritten rules. I don't know what meeting I was on recently, but someone was talking about walking into a shelter and seeing this group of staff all huddled together. And so it was the director asked them what they were doing. And they were trying to come up with a way to refuse returning an animal to an owner. And we've all seen it. We've all probably been party to it. I know I have. I mean, my lens has changed quite a bit over the last few years, but there's so many things that we could be doing beforehand, especially with our field officers, because they're the ones that have face-to-face contact with pet owners in the community. So how proactive are we in advance of an animal actually being lost? I could go on and on about the before.
Gina, can I ask a question really quick about the before? Something that you said really resonated with me is what we measure, we kind of focus on. In this group, how many of you actually know or a rough idea of what your RTO rate is at your shelter? You can just use the chat. You don't have to say what it is. You can just say yes or no. That'd be great to know.
Good question, Bobby. And what I find, and I've been fortunate to speak to shelters all over the country, most don't know. And then many are calculating it incorrectly because you have to peel off those animals that really aren't lost, right? They came to you because of an incident, an investigation, neonatal kittens. That's not part of your calculation. So is it just your stray intake and how many of those animals are going home? That's a very good point, Bobby. You know, what about your local ordinances and the really cost prohibitive, restrictive fees that we impose on people who really love their animals but can't afford to get them back? You know, how many of us have like a guardian fund, if you will, or a donation pot where if someone can't financially afford to get their pet back, the RTO fees are covered? How many of us have the ability, the freedom to waive an RTO fee wherever you are, or the courage to do it, even if you don't know if you can? It's looking at all of those things beforehand. You know, one of the things we did in Sacramento was back in 2012 when the governor vetoed mandatory microchipping, he kind of pissed me off. So we just started including it as part of our service on all RTOs. And we would say to people, how would you like a free microchip for your pet today? And 99.99% of the people absolutely took us up on that, and a free ID tag. And I know that there were some that says, how can you afford to do that? So, you know, you're investing on the front end so that you're saving on the back end. So from 2012 to 2018, we were looking at the number of animals that were coming in with some form of identification. And it was about 12% in 2012. And in the end of 2018, we were up to 40% of the animals coming in with something, ID tag, license, chip, something. So I believe that our front end investment had an impact, and it was actually far cheaper to do that than if you consider the daily cost of care, especially if that animal has to be completely vetted for adoption. So there's lots of things to think about. The national RTO rate is about 22%. Shelters that, I'll use Washoe County in Reno, for example, they do beautiful work, but they are the only shelter in town and they're attached to the Humane Society. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Everybody knows to go there. The RTO rates are very, very high. But then if you look at the Chicago area where there are literally more than a dozen shelters, people don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. It's very confusing. So we can't compare each other equally across the board. I don't think that's fair because our demographics and everything from socioeconomics are so different, but it's being aware of what's happening in our communities. Marketing, blah, blah, blah. So the during part, and Rory, I don't want to talk too long. I want people to be able to, so you give me that if I talk too much, okay?
Absolutely.
The during, I think it's super important to identify one or more people on your team to be reunification experts. And that's what Jennifer was at Front Street, and I hope continues to be for them. And if you can't dedicate staff to it, we all have an abundance of volunteers that are just, noshing to help us do this kind of work. But one of the big things that I see that's successful are shelters that publish on their websites the lost and found reports so that the customer can self-serve. I think Maricopa has a really good platform. They use their city's GIS, so all lost and found reports are publicly viewable. So there's a big map and there's dots with different colors. So if you lost a dog in a particular area, you can click on all the found reports in that area and potentially find your pet. It's amazing. But during also, in addition to assigning dedicated staff and focusing attention on that, is helping people navigate the process. Most people don't know what to do. I don't know if you're all familiar with the Lost to Found texting program that Bobby and his team at Front Street created. Several shelters across the country are using it now. So if a person loses a pet, they text a particular word to a phone number and they start getting all the URLs for the shelters in their area. Video tutorials on how to find an indoor cat or an outdoor cat, because it's all very different and we know that, but the average pet owner doesn't know that. Lots of helpful tips, tricks, techniques, but it's all in one place and it gives those pet owners tangible things to do, because we all know that when someone comes in to look for a lost pet, it depends on who they talk to, right? They'll get walked through the facility and they're usually upset. So they're only retaining about 25% of what you're trying to tell them anyway. So we found that this texting program was a great way to kind of compartmentalize. Yeah, shout out to Ryan Hinderman. He did a really good job with that. It was actually his project. But giving people, it's like the encyclopedia of what to do if you lose a pet, and now they've morphed and they have a whole what if you found a lost animal, and they're using it for their foster program and they're using with volunteer communication too. So I'm happy to share that information afterwards or offline. You can email me, I'll give you the scripting and everything. Jennifer, feel free to pipe in anytime if you think of the during part.
I do want to add one thing. I would say the majority of our digital lost and found reports do come from that texting platform because of the convenience of a mobile app that prompts you within, I think it's right now about 2 minutes. Hey, you lost a pet, please fill out the survey online, and includes a picture, information, a little comment section, a email to email us directly for any further questions that they may have.
Yeah, super smart, and it's super affordable. I think Sacramento's spending $1,200 a year on that platform. Takes them maybe a day to set up, maybe 2 or less. And then once you're done with it, the secret to the secret sauce is letting your community know that it exists and making sure that all of your staff share that information with customers.
One more thing to add, Gina. Our
sure.
volunteers are awesome at pushing it on Nextdoor, on community lost and found forums, on Facebook, in person. I think that's a big thing, is having your community also spread that message. And that's how you can not only market that, but it's free marketing.
It's absolutely free marketing. And the beauty about most of these things that we have at our fingertips, they're free. Craigslist is free. It doesn't cost us anything. So you have a Craigslist team of volunteers that cross-check, you know, your lost and found reports to the postings on Craigslist. It's not rocket science. If it were, none of us could do it, because I mean, I can't do it. I'm not that smart. But there's so much available to us, because it's our job, right? We're here to help people. I mean, we want to prevent an animal from becoming lost to begin with, but when they do, we're kind of I guess the Bible, if you will, for pet owners, and they rely on us. And one of the most beautiful things about not just reunification, but sharing those stories, this kind of goes to the after, sharing the stories about the work that we're doing, keeping people and their pets together, builds trust. It builds community faith in what we do and why we do what we do. Because let's face it, I mean, you're all part of the whole paying attention to the weekly calls, the Haas movement. Our business is changing. But I think it's changing in a really good way. The after part to me, and I'll let you guys do some talking, and Jennifer can chat as well. The after part is, are we tracking the data? When someone comes in to redeem their animal, are we asking them, how did you know your pet was here? And are we tracking that information? And I think it's critically important. The preliminary data that we see now, that the number one way that a pet owner gets their pet back is via microchip, and the second way is Nextdoor. And Sacramento was very successful in getting their own Nextdoor account. They post every single stray dog to Nextdoor to the appropriate neighborhood on a daily basis. And we can quantifiably say that had a direct impact on increasing the RTO rate in our city. And not only that, it increased donations, increased community support. Subliminally, I think too, we're always on the minds. I always say we, I don't work there anymore, but Front Street is always on the minds of the active folks on Nextdoor, because there's a lot of stray animals. And it just really totally raised awareness. And that whole project is 100% volunteer managed, no staff time. So there really are no excuses to implementing a variety of the things that I spew all the time, if you trust people to help you do that work. But data is really, really important. You know, when I think back to my time at Front Street, I kind of kick myself because I didn't know what I didn't know when it came to how many people are we helping outside of the shelter, and how critically important it is to track that information. You know, and why in the world would we care if a lost dog that was found by somebody was reunited? We do care, because if we were part of that mechanism, of that reunion, we played a part in it. And I think it also helps to justify some of the funding that we get and how we're using that funding to prevent animals from coming in, because it's a lot cheaper to help them when they're not even with you than if they come to the shelter. Jennifer, why don't you talk for a few minutes and tell the folks how you became the reunification expert, what you kind of training you took, what that's like, what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so thank you, Gina. So it all started with Gina's wild idea, as most of her ideas are, is, hey, our lost and found reports are collecting dust. We had this like really old binder sitting in our lobby that was just collecting dust. Every now and then a volunteer would go through them and kind of see what we had in intake, and some people would use it, but most of them didn't have pictures. Most of them did not know their microchip numbers, the lost reports, and we kind of came up with the digital lost and found pet reunification program on how to implement all of those lost reports on our website. We saw Pima, Arizona do something similar, and we were inspired, and we got with IT and we figured out how to do that, and it was pretty easy. I mean, I think the hardest part is just working with your IT department on creating something that is seamless and easy on a mobile device that's not, 50 questions. It's very easy and simple, because if it's going to take you 5 minutes to fill out a loss report, you already lost that person. And so I took a course with Mission Reunite on a missing pet consultant certificate program, learned about everything that we have been learning about a lost cat, a lost dog, how people are finding their pets, flyers, and really it all comes down to that missing pet. Their owner lives in that neighborhood. Most likely that owner is in that area that it went missing from. So let's keep it in that neighborhood. Let's make sure it stays there. Let's communicate with your neighbors and see how you can find that owner. And the lost and found, the digital reports on our website were a big help with that. A lot of people would call us, oh, I see my pet on your website, and they would call our 311 call center and they would communicate with us, someone at the shelter, and we would then reunite those two calling parties together with a simple texting. We have this free texting program called Mighty Text that is downloaded on all of our desktops here at work, our customer service representatives, and they can easily send out a group chat. Hey, Gina, I saw that your missing pet, Lulu, was reported to us. Great news. A neighbor found her. Here is her number. Please send us a reunion picture to ensure that your pet was reunited. We often follow up with, okay, great, Lulu is back. Why don't you bring her in for a $5 microchip? And then at that point, once they're with us, then we can talk about, spay neuter, licensing, but we don't want to start off with, hey, you need to license your pet. Never like that. Always like, amazing news. Let's get your dog microchipped ASAP if it doesn't already have one. So that's something we've been really pushing hard here at Front Street since COVID hit even more so. It's let's make sure all of these pets, let's follow up. Let's do that after data tracking even more so. We have recently started tracking all of those other ways that those community dogs and cats that are found and lost, how are they finding their way back home? Is it truly the digital reports? Is it a neighbor? Is it a flyer? So sorry, you can stop me at any point because I tend to talk really, really fast. But we have started keeping track of those platforms. And yes, Gina, you're right. It's Nextdoor. Nextdoor is winning across the board along with the pet reunification program. It's so easy now. You could go onto our website and it has a little prompt. Oh, I lost my pet. I lost my dog. And then it prompts you, okay, check out the reported dogs that were found by citizens in the city of Sacramento. And it shows you a list of pictures, the location, and a number to call, which is our 311 call center. A really cool thing that we recently started implementing is manage intake here because of COVID, having appointment-based straight intakes. At the moment, someone calls us and say that they found an injured dog, an injured cat, a healthy dog. We immediately ask for a picture, a description, a location, and we create a found report. And what we are noticing right now is that we recently started tracking, so I can't really give real numbers, but the majority of these dogs, if they call us at 9 a.m. to create an appointment for drop off at 4 p.m., the likelihood of that owner finding the picture of their missing dog on our website is very high. And we're starting now to keep track of those numbers. And I wish we would have started earlier on, but like Gina said, we really didn't know. We were just happy that they were being reunited outside of the shelter, but that's really good information to know and to follow up with.
So I have so many questions. I'm sure other people do too. This is amazing information. I'm taking all of these notes and my brain's just firing in a million different directions, but wondering if you have a job description you can share that we could share more widely. Also, I'm curious what other people are tracking too and what they're not tracking, because I'm a huge data nerd, but do you all have the data points that you are tracking that we could put out more widely and say start tracking these?
Yeah, so we have a really great dashboard that will be going live very soon. We're just waiting to finalize some numbers. I can definitely share that with you guys once we have that live. And my job description is I am an entry-level customer service representative. And when Gina was with us, she kind of reformatted my position to fully focus on pet reunification, whether that was, taking continued education. Currently, I just finished the shelter management certificate through UOP. But we kind of just reformatted my position, and other people in my position also know what to do and how to do it. And especially right now with COVID, with some of our staff still working remotely, they are able to guide that customer or citizen that lost their pet or found a pet, those guidelines on what to do, how to post. We can even print out lost reports for them or found reports and do kind of like a curbside pickup, and even do courtesy posts for them on the 26 lost and found Facebook groups in Sacramento.
Are there really 26 now?
I mean, there is 26 in the surrounding areas. Active in downtown Sacramento, that area in the city of Sacramento, I would say at least 8 active with at least 3,000 or more members.
And that's another thing. I'm sure all of you have these private Facebook pages in your communities. It's really important to reach out to those admins and introduce yourself and form a relationship, because they can be your biggest advocates. I mean, I don't say this in a negative way, but these people are crazy about helping lost pets in a very good, crazy kind of way. And we should be utilizing that free labor as much as we can and developing relationships with them.
And on that note, I would say most of the administration admins of those groups have my direct email, a direct number to contact the shelter in case there is an emergency. Especially right now during COVID, we learned that we need to have that line of communication with our volunteers, even if they're not volunteering directly with our shelter. They're a big help. They're pushing that message, that text lost stray pet to 555-888. They're really doing all of this messaging for you, and it's free marketing, and you really want to help them out and make sure that they're not being put through your call center, long hold wait times. And it's definitely something that I learned during COVID, is having that relationship and transparent relationship with the community during these times.
Jordana posted that we need them to open their platform to more shelters, and I presume you're referring to next. So here's what happened in Sacramento. I thought this was a really good idea. And I went, so in cities and counties, next door platforms are generally managed by the police or sheriff's department, okay? And that's in Sacramento, it's the city police department that owns next door. So I went to the city manager's office, to the main PIO, and I said, I want to have our Front Street have its own next door login under the city's next door platform. And they promptly told me no. And so one of my volunteers, who apparently had influence with council, called his council member and explained what I was trying to accomplish. And the very next day, we had a login. So it's not next door that's not letting you do it, it's your government entity. Now, if you're a nonprofit like Humane Society or SPCA, it may be more challenging, but if you're a government agency and there's next door in your city or county, you should be able to get it. And I'm happy to talk to anyone in your respective jurisdictions. Front Street has been doing it for 3 years successfully. They have a standard template that they use. They do not deviate from it. The volunteers can work from home. Every single day they have shifts. They take like 5 days on, and then they transfer it to another person. In all the years that I was there and we were using it, not one bad thing happened. Nobody went rogue. It didn't do anything but help us. So I think Sacramento is a really good example of how it can be managed. And if next door is, you can only post in the respective neighborhood where the animal is missing. You can't spy on all these neighborhoods. People don't understand. It doesn't work that way. And the only time you're going to be able to comment is if somebody comments under one of your posts. And the volunteers that we had working on that, they had guidelines, there were rules, and none of them violated those rules. It was actually fascinating. And if a question was posted by a customer, a resident of the city, that they couldn't answer, that was when they would reach out for guidance. But most of the time they were pretty autonomous, and really nothing bad happened, only good came out of that. So what did you post something, Rory?
I think we would all love the template.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Like, people are really wanting that template. And Justin said that he did the same thing in Greenville, and other people are on next door on here too, it seems like. But that does seem like it's still quite a big struggle.
We were lucky here in Brampton because next door is just getting started in Canada. Animal Services was the first one to approach them in Brampton. And so we've had other city divisions reach out to us because they connected with Nextdoor. And they said, oh, apparently you're already on Nextdoor. So can you tell us how that's going? So we just leapt right into it.
Good. Yeah, it's a great tool, you know, and my original intent was just to increase the RTO rate, but the unintended positive consequences were overwhelming. I mean, it was probably one of the smartest things we did, I think.
Hey, Jen, I have a question for you. I'm so glad that you're here joining us today. I think it is so cool that your shelter is investing the energy into actually sort of reclassifying your position, kind of giving a sense of ownership of RTO, because I do believe if you really put energy into it, you're going to increase your rate. But I know that can be kind of a scary conversation for some shelters to think about transitioning a person from one position to another. Can you talk about originally when you started, being a customer service rep and still doing front counter work? How many of your hours were actually focused on RTO and then the other hours still doing your regular job? And how were you able to show your management the value in those hours to be able to increase the time you spent on RTO?
Yeah, so at first it started with working on RTO before we opened to the public. So started at 9, opened to the public at 12, had lunch hour before that. So really like 2 hours a day, roughly, 8 to 9 a week. Every so often would, whenever it was slow, go to the back office and kind of focus on that. So I would say an average of 12 hours a week. How I was able to show my manager at the time, Gina, how we need to have a full-time customer service representative or pet reunification expert on it was showing how many animals that I was on, like manually tracking. At that time we weren't really like tracking data. I was just like, okay, this dog was reclaimed and I followed up with this person, checklist. I figured out that at least 30 dogs a month during that time we were saving from the shelter. We were reuniting them before they came to the shelter. That was myself all doing that I knew about, that I calculated myself with. So show those numbers to my manager, and with the daily cost of the length of stay of an animal was roughly around $25 at the time. And then kind of showed, hey, if we're able to ensure that at least 30 dogs a month are not coming into our shelter because of this program, and because I'm spending at least 12 hours a week, this is the X amount of money that we are saving in revenue of this, preventing this animal coming into the shelter, possibly getting sick from kennel cough, possibly, accruing more costs to the shelter. And then we were able to sit down and, okay, we're going to move your position from front counter to at least 2 to 3 days specifically in the back office, focusing on this. And yes, and what we notice is a full-time position will save in revenue so much for any organization, not just a municipal shelter. I truly believe any organization. And that includes someone cross-training multiple staff members, even volunteers, so that everyone has access to this program. You don't want just one person specifically only being the one doing it, but you want someone to oversee the program, I would say.
And someone else mentioned that there's no way to capture all the records on Nextdoor in case there's a PRA. Sacramento uses, what was that platform called, Bobby? Something freeze. Page freeze. The city of Sacramento's police department uses Nextdoor all the time. So I find it incredibly difficult to believe that those records are not subject to public record. I mean, that they're retrievable, just like every text message is. So I'm not sure I believe that either, Erica.
I think the issue is that how does our municipality retain all of those? Because we have to retain everything on Facebook and everywhere else.
Well, it doesn't go away. So Sacramento uses a product called Page Freeze, and it literally captures every piece of social media content. Every time a website is changed or updated, I don't know how it works. It's magic. But I would imagine, since law enforcement typically oversees Nextdoor accounts, that every single comment, post, etc., is captured on Nextdoor and retrievable, or they would not do it. Impossible. I was surprised to see, Kathy, that Microchipping is considered a surgical procedure. Huh,
Yeah,
it's not,
yeah.
it's not in California.
In Ontario, so even when we run microchip clinics at the shelter, we have to have a volunteer veterinarian come in. And I mean, our team does it. Our RVTs do the chipping itself. The vet sits in the back of the shelter working on something completely unrelated. She's just in the building typically. We have had a couple where we've had veterinarians volunteer and are actively involved in the chipping, and we'll run a rabies clinic as well. But yeah, so we're stuck in that regard. A number of shelters have tried to implement some of that stuff and have actually been challenged by the regulatory body for the veterinarians.
Wow, that's awful.
I
I know
know.
that there are some shelters that chip at intake. So they're chipping for, I mean, they're vaccinating, right, for all of the preventative illnesses, and they're chipping at intake without owner consent, which I think is super smart. If you can get away with that, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I would love to be able to do that, and maybe I'll add it to my to-do list to connect with, because we have a pretty good relationship with the registrar of the regulatory body for the veterinarians, and start that conversation and just say, look, like, you know, why is microchipping considered this type of service? You know, breeders do it for the animals that they sell, and we know it gets animals home more quickly, so we should be able, there should be some kind of exemption for shelters to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the laws are so different from state to state.
Yeah.
Something else that we did in Sacramento, and I don't know how active the SMART team is right now because of COVID, but actually having a team of volunteers that go to places where people and their dogs congregate, like breweries, dog parks, and offer free scanning for pet owners, because most people don't know what their microchip company is, what the number is, how to update it. And it's literally a free service. And they scan the animal for the person, write the chip down on this lovely form, and include information on how to register their chip to the Found Animals Foundation registry, because it's the only free registry. So that two things. A, it's a good messaging for the community. You're not asking them to give you any money. You're not performing any kind of service other than scanning the animal for them. And I do have the check a chip guideline and the form that we give to citizens. If anybody wants a copy of that, I can give it to Rory. I forgot what I was just going to say.
I actually have a question for the group. How many of you have at your shelter your own tag engraving machines? You can use the chat to answer that question. The reason why I think this is so important, and Front Street does a really great job of this, and I think this even goes sort of to the concept of what we're focusing on with DEI and really going into our community and having people that look like our community support our community. So we would actually at Front Street allow people to borrow our ID tag maker. And so, like, for example, at the Dia de Muertos event, we would have like our district basically take it, and they would have their volunteers create tags for people during sort of like our firefighter safety events. Our fire department would take it because, you know, people might not like cops, but everyone loves firefighters. So we would give away, you know, dozens and dozens of tags. And through that, we were able to not only develop a relationship, because we would have some of our branding there, like this is Front Street, but the faces would always be different. So that was a really good way for us to get tags in the community. And then Gina, I have a question for you about RTO rate. So Spencer posted something in the chat earlier about the success rate of their dogs and then their success rate of their cats. And I know you're really about how do you really measure the true success rate of RTO. How would you describe the way that you would measure cat RTO rates?
I would peel off every neonatal kitten, you know, that box of kittens that comes in under 8 weeks, that crew, peel them off. I would take out every single feral cat, because we know that they don't technically have a house to go back to. And any kind of owner euthanasia request, owner surrender, or a confiscation case, just that friendly, healthy, normal cat that comes into our facility, that is a lost cat. It's not lost, somebody stole it from its neighborhood. We all know that. That's how I do it. And that's what we recommend doing. And so the people always, or we always say that the RTO rate for cats in America is 1 to 2%, and that's not true. My guess is it's about 10% of the owned cats that end up in a shelter that get back home with their people. So that's what I would recommend.
Is anybody else doing that, or are they mostly just counting cats in, cats out?
It depends. All the shelters are doing it differently, which is another revelation for all of us to try to be more consistent.
Oh yeah, I was asking if anybody in the group.
Oh, here, is anybody doing it differently?
And I'm curious if anyone has any other questions, like while we have these wonderful folks with us today. If people
Chris put something up about they offer a free ID tag or include an ID tag with every adoption, and I responded, tag every RTO2. No animal should leave your shelter naked. We would give them a collar and an ID tag, and that was super, super important, because especially with adoptions, the likelihood of that animal escaping that new home in the first 72 hours is incredibly high. But Chris, you said something about finding the funds to cover the tags. So, and Jen can speak to this, I was really pushing to have the customer service team ask at the end of every transaction, positive transaction at the counter, if the customer would like to round up to help the next animal. And what was it? How high was it? 1 month, $12,000 in donations. That would pay for tags forever. So you might want to consider that, or ask people for a donation. When we would do community microchip events, we made more money asking for donations than if we had charged everybody 20 bucks a pop. So don't limit yourself, because there's a way to do it.
Yeah, Gina, and I made a note last week or whenever we were in the Radical RTO panel. I don't really remember. It's all a blur. But I made a note of that then, and we just haven't implemented yet, though. But it'll either be our trust fund, it'll be our friends group, or the at the desk donation. It gets a little touchy with government employees asking for donations, especially when we have a friends group. So we do some of that, but yeah, I'll work it out. Stay tuned. Next time I'll say I'm one of those people issuing to every animal that leaves.
Yeah, we were lucky in Sacramento that we were able to ask for donations made directly to the shelter, and we had a friends group. People don't realize you can donate to government and still write it off on your taxes. I don't know if that's true in every state, but that was the case in California.
Yeah, Gina, we've got that latitude too. It's more about union pushback or employee pushback on what their job spec is. So that's where, like, I could be up there all day asking for it because it's in my job description, but the rest of our staff, it's not necessarily. And so that's the process or the challenge that we have.
Gosh, time to rewrite job descriptions.
Yeah. And boost everybody's salary. That's the way it rolls out.
That's right. Every single time.
Chris,
Jen,
I
you
know
guys
that
still asking for donations? Oh, you're not at the counter anymore because of COVID. Never mind.
Chris, here in Ontario, City of Toronto Animal Services went online with their licensing, their pet licensing, probably close to a dozen years ago now. And they just put an option on the web page. So people are already there, they've got their credit card out, they're doing the online pet licensing and asking if they want to make a donation to the shelter. And they had over $1 million at one point when I talked to them a few years back. So, it's so easy to ask that way as well. And then your staff, quote unquote, don't have to specifically make the ask.
Yeah. Or you can just put donation jars at the counter. We did that too, and it brought in thousands and thousands of dollars every year without ever asking. They're just there. So there's always more than one way to skin a cucumber.
Are there any other questions from folks?
Trying to scan them as we go.
I have a question about the importance of actually putting the tags on, Gina. I think there's some data out there. Oftentimes shelters might make tags for people or make a tag for a pet that's going home, but don't always put it on. What are your recommendations about that?
Well, like I said, I don't think any animal should leave the shelter naked, period. because the likelihood, especially with a fresh adoption, that animal's confused, it's a new environment. Plus you're reinforcing the importance of doing it if you've got the person right there. And here's your tag, here's your collar, everything's on it, good to go. And it's our job to be reinforcing that message, I think.
You know, the last time I saw the data, it was like 40 or 45%. If you hand the tag to the person, are the chances of them actually putting it on the dog versus just putting it in their little adoption binder.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned Pet Hub. I'm a big fan of those tags with the QR codes on them. Who said that? Am I seeing things?
Oh, you saw it?
Did you see it?
Yep.
Who mentioned Pet Hub? Maybe they left.
Maybe.
Anyways, Pet Hub is a great, it's a license tag. It can also just be an ID tag, but they are just as affordable as those metal tags that most of us currently buy. And they have a QR code, they're branded, they have your logo on it, your phone number plus their 24-hour phone number. It's quite the beautiful tag. And again, they guaranteed not to cost you any more than you're already spending on tags. So I highly recommend it. They're trendy too. People love them because they're branded.
And you know, on that, if your shelter is open, I suggest taking one, creating a fake account, putting a cute picture on there, having it in your front counter, and then just taking out your iPhone and scanning it. That's what we did. The front lobby when we were rolling it out 2 years ago. People didn't know what to do. People were kind of like, what do you have to do? And it's like, oh, just take out your phone, scan it. Oh, look, there's Lulu. There you go.
Yeah.
Bobby, it was the ASPCA, I think, that did that research on identification. And you're right, the finding, and I want to say it was probably close to 6 or 8 years ago now, I'll look up the study though, was that for those animals that were actively tagged by either the shelter or at the veterinary clinics that they were working with, there was, I think it was over 75% or 80% rate of retention from the standpoint of keeping the tag on, and certainly an increased incidence of finding their pets if they got lost. And if the tag was put on by the shelter staff or the veterinary clinic staff and then was lost, there was a higher percentage incidence of the owner reaching out to get that tag replaced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Sacramento, we use the Pet Hub tag as our license. I see that. I found it now. Justin said they give free Pet Hub tags away with every adoption or RTO. Justin, are you using it as an ID tag or as a license?
Right now, we're using it as an ID tag. Every time licensing has been proposed here, it gets shot down incredibly fast. Although we are looking at a way to use that kind of like a license without calling it a license, and are in the process of getting that implemented now.
Good job. Marie, have I missed any questions?
I don't think so.
Oh, I see what Bobby wrote. Yeah, Finding Rover. All of you Finding Rover partners already? And it's a great program, but it's only great if your employees talk about it. If your employees and volunteers can explain it to pet owners. It's even better if you have registered that pet in Finding Rover preliminarily for that person before they leave your facility. San Diego Humane does that. The system works, but it only works if we work it, which is true with most things. And yes, they did put me in a kennel once and created an animal ID number for me. And when I was RTO'd, my husband got a text message from Finding Rover. So you definitely know it works.
That's awesome.
I miss those days.
Does anyone else have any questions? It's been so awesome to have you here. I feel like this hour has just flown by for me. Any other questions?
So I guess my sorry, go ahead, Erica.
Sorry. We've been going back and forth on mailing people a postcard that we know that their animal is at the shelter. And now with all the delays in the Postal Service, we sort of delayed creating one and putting one out. So I'm wondering if there's any statistics on, should we put this effort in at this point?
Well, I mean, I think if you have a phone number for that pet owner, you should be texting them immediately, because we know text messages work better than anything else we could be doing, like mailing something. If you can continue to do all of it, I would do all of it. Some jurisdictions are actually having ACOs drive to people's houses and leaving a notice on the door. I mean, it all depends where you live. It's different how busy you are, what you have the ability to do. But we have a responsibility to be super creative. And the best place for an animal typically is to go right back home where they belong, where they have a name and a couch and people that love them.
I love that. Thank you so much. Before we leave, I know that Jordana and Claire had a couple of things that they wanted to share with some information that we're trying to gather. Jordana, Claire?
Yes, so we have a survey. So AmPA created just a really brief contagious disease survey. We're trying to collect information about pre-COVID and what we're seeing right now. I hate to say post-COVID because it's not really post-COVID, but it's about a 10-minute survey. It's not very long, maybe even shorter than that. But if you guys could take just a little bit of time to fill it out, we would absolutely appreciate it. Like I said, it's not really long at all. And then there's one question at the end. If you do want to submit a little bit more data, we can reach out to you. But yeah, we're interested to see what you guys are seeing in your organizations. I am predicting that you're going to be seeing less contagious disease, but I'm excited for results. I posted the survey link in the chat.
Jordana, just to confirm, I presume you only want one response per organization, since I have a whole bunch of people involved in this group.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. One response per org would be great. Thank you.
And I'm looking for the very best RTO or lost and found website in the country. I haven't found it yet. So if you think your agency is the absolute best, please email me.
And Claire, do you want to share briefly about your transport poll?
Yes, thank you. This is the week of surveys, so this won't take you very long as well. I'm going to share it in the chat. Just one organization needs to reply to it, so if you want to click on it before we close. But this is looking at organizations that are either transporting out animals or bringing them in. Also, if you are a network, I would appreciate if you could share this. We're trying to get as many responses as possible. We did a similar survey in March when COVID really hit to see what the impact was on transport programs. We're getting a lot of requests from funders and pretty important people that want to know, what do organizations need now for their transport programs? So really appreciate that. If you could fill it out and then share it with anyone that might be in your network. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. And then Kelly, what do we have next week coming up for the summit? You're muted.
Hold on, I need to check it out.
You're muted is going to be a new word in the dictionary. So is Zoom. So is Zoom, but I decided I'm making that up.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much, Gina and Jen, for joining us. It's been really super informative. I'm just like, I have like 3 pages of notes now that I need to type up. I love the before, during, and after. I think that's so smart. Super cool.
Next week is intake to placement. We're going to have Danielle Harris from FEMA Animal Care Center.
Awesome. Excellent. Anything else or announcements or anything that people want to share while we have a few minutes? No announcements, nothing to share. All right.
Everybody gets an extra 5 minutes to their day.
I'm just going to say I'm glad it's Friday.
Yeah.
Yay, Friday.
Yes.
Thank you, Rory.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much.
Thanks,
Thanks
Gina.
everyone for being here. It's always great to see you all, and see you soon.
Bye,
Thank you,
guys.
Maddie.
See you next week.